Good evening. Welcome to Young's Chapel Wednesday night Bible study. Tonight we will be starting a new study in the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament. We're going to be doing an overview of the chapter of the book tonight, and then we'll start next week with the first chapter, first verse. Got a couple of different things I want to bring out and talk about. And we'll start with this. Did anybody this week look up to see what Nehemiah means? Remember, all names have a meaning. Nehemiah means comforted by Yahweh. Comforted by Yahweh. And his father, anybody can pronounce his father's name? I'll go with that. I actually listened to it, but I didn't get to listen to it enough times to be able to try to pronounce it. Hatchaliah is close enough. And his father's name means who waits for the Lord. So I found that very interesting even before I started into my studies in Nehemiah. His father's name means who waits for the Lord, and he named his son Comforted by Yahweh. Pretty cool, huh? How many of you learned something already? And now we're going to discuss the authorship. There are two theological thoughts, and I'm going to read this first part here. It says, the use of the first person pronoun in Nehemiah 1:1 gives the impression that Nehemiah was the writer. But there are other theologians who think that Ezra wrote it, but that he was copying it from a diary done that Nehemiah did write. Okay? If Ezra was the writer, he was copying from a journal of Nehemiah. This book, as was true in the book of Ezra, has copies of letters. It's a history book. It has copies of letters, decrees, registers, and other documents, by the way, which have been authenticated through things that have been found by archaeologists. With the name Sanballat and the other ones that are mentioned in it, there have been papyruses that have been found that name those same people at the same time in history. So it has been authenticated. Yeah, it's authentic. We'll just say that. The same man wrote both books. The writer perhaps was Ezra, or it could be Nehemiah. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah are one in the same in the Hebrew canon. So when you go to the Hebrew Bible, the canon, Nehemiah and Ezra are one book. They're split in our Bible and named two names. But in the Hebrew Bible, in the canon, they're one. So I found that very interesting as well. They've been split into two for our Bible, but in the original Hebrew canon, they were one. This is just some of the stuff that I found as I was looking into it this week for us to do our overview. Nehemiah was a layman. Ezra was a priest. Okay? The book of Ezra, the emphasis upon rebuilding of the temple. What else? He's rebuilding the church. He's rebuilding the temple. He was a priest. In the book of Nehemiah, the emphasis is on rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem and also the society of Jerusalem. In Ezra, we have the religious aspect of the return from the captivity. And in Nehemiah, we have the political aspect of the return from captivity. That gives you a lot more insight into it, right? That's why Ezra was a priest and he was a layperson. Now, he was a cupbearer. Nehemiah was a cupbearer to Artaxerxes. And that's close. That's southern pronunciation, Alabama southern pronunciation. The first. I've got some things highlighted here I wanted to bring out for y'all. Where Ezra established the spiritual establishment of the new community, Nehemiah succeeded in giving it physical stability. Amen? He brought back the day-to-day living, the safety of being there with walled city again, the gates rebuilt that were burned down. As the priest, Ezra just wanted to go in and get worship established, get people back and get worship established. But God gave Nehemiah the heart for reestablishing the common man, reestablishing the hierarchy of having a people in their own city, their own capital. He wanted all of that to be secure for them. Because you've got to remember, they had been removed, for the most part, from Israel. We know that they were removed. Who can tell me why they were removed? It's in the book of Jeremiah. Anybody? How many of you ever heard the word Shemitah? Shemitah cycle. They were given the Shemitah cycle when they went into the land flowing with milk and honey. They were to work the land for 6 years and let it rest on the Sabbath. The seventh year, well, they did that for years, but then their faith faltered and they began to plant, because what if God didn't come through? Well, it tells you, and you can go back and look for it in the book of Jeremiah, that the reason they were displaced was because they had missed 70 Shemitah cycles. That's how Daniel, who was gone with the 3 Hebrew children, in his old age, knew that it was almost time for them to return, because he knew that they had to fulfill the 70 Shemitah cycles and let the land rest consecutively for 70 years. Amen? Y'all learned something else there, didn't you? And we pulled that out of the book of Jeremiah. See how all these books and the history and everything fits together, and the more you learn, the more you understand how and what's going on. Because there's a cause and an effect in everything in this Bible. God doesn't do anything for nothing. Amen? And them being displaced and taken out of the land was because they refused to trust God, number one, and to keep the Shemitah cycle, which he commanded them to do when they entered into the land. We could leave right now, and y'all have already learned a whole lot tonight, hadn't you? Let's see. He learns, or we're told right off the bat in the first couple of verses, that it came to pass that in the 20th year, as he was in the palace, that there was things come to his knowledge about Jerusalem, about the gates being burned, about the walls being torn down, that everything was in a shambles. Even though they had been in and they had rebuilt the temple to the point that they were able to worship, nothing else had been accomplished. They were at best vulnerable to anybody and everything that came along. And God gave Nehemiah a burden on his heart for that. And he gave him such a burden that he fasted. And when he went before the king to serve him as a cupbearer, the king asked him, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I want you to see this, his countenance, he was sad. And the king said, I know you're not sick, so what's so heavy on your heart that's making you, undoubtedly, he was an upbeat person like me. And the king could tell a difference in his countenance. And then when Nehemiah told him, why should I be upbeat and happy when I know that our homeland and the people there are suffering and that our homeland is in shambles? And he tells him that, and he's such a fine servant to the king that the king sees his heart and his love and his burden, and he grants him his wish to go back and be able to do that. And the 13 chapters of Nehemiah tell us about that and how the king furnishes the wood. He sends him letters to the governors across going back through so that he'll have safe passage and help. But even though he's got the Xerxes behind him, there are still people that don't want to see them reestablished, just like there has been all the way through time. There's people right now, we've got Israel has become a nation again. In the 40s, they celebrated 70-something years now of being a nation again. But you've got people that are anti-Semites around the world who hate them and want them destroyed. They want to kill every one of them or push them into the sea and drown them all. And what you find is that because of the devil behind it, that's been that way all the way through. That's why you had Hitler and the Nazis. That's why they were kicked out of Europe and ended up looking for another place to go, and so many of them came to America when it was discovered and created. And that was God making a way for his people. A lot of people don't realize that. But not only was God making a way for people who wanted to worship the way they wanted to worship, rather than the traditional church, but he was also making a way for the Jews to have a place while they were dispersed until he was going to fulfill prophecy and begin to bring them back in the end times to their land that he promised Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Amen. And it was prophesied in the Old Testament that that would happen. Do you know that since the creation of Israel and Trump changed the one of the things that had to happen before Jesus could come back was a president, or the world had to designate Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. 5 presidents prior to Trump had promised that and never did it. That never happened. But yet Trump did it, and he did it on the 70th anniversary of them becoming a nation. There's a phrase in the Bible that when the fullness of time came, if you'll go back to when the angel came to Mary, it says something about the fullness of time and the angel came to Mary. God's got a plan that is just like a clock. And it's not haphazard. He's got a set time for things to happen. The set time for Israel to become a nation again was exactly when it became a nation again in the 40s. The set time for Jerusalem to become the capital of Israel, recognized by America, one of the strongest countries in the world, was on the anniversary date, the 70th anniversary date. That was ordained by God. People sometimes fail to understand that even though the things we see happening sometimes seem out of control, they don't catch God by surprise. They're on God's schedule. Amen? Okay, I'll get off my little soapbox. Divine government. A lot of 7s, a lot of 12s, a lot of 10s, 40s, a lot of 40s. And the more it fits together. Let's see what else we got here. Historical setting. In addition to the material cited in the introduction to the book of Ezra in 444 BC, 14 years after Ezra returned to Jerusalem, Nehemiah also returned. So it was 14 years after Ezra had returned. We know that it was in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. That's told us in chapter 1, verse 1. And again to his 32nd year, and we're going to find that in chapter 13, verse 6. The reference must be to Xerxes the First, who ruled and would yield the dates for the book of Nehemiah to 445 and 433 BC, respectively. Okay? All right. You remember I told you that they had discovered a papyrus, which is a scroll, and I'm going to spell it for you and then try to pronounce it. Elephantin. It's almost like elephant. The first of it's like an elephant. The elephantine or something like that. Elephantin. I don't know. But that papyrus was discovered in AD 1903. And it confirmed the historicity of the book of Nehemiah, mentioned in Sanballat, who is mentioned chapter 2, verse 19. And Johan, which is mentioned in chapter 6 and chapter 12. And these sources also tell us that Nehemiah ceased to be the governor of Judah before 408 BC, thus making a later date for Nehemiah impossible. Amen? So that kind of narrows us down on the historical time span of when this book would have done. Most people agree on the authorship of Nehemiah, but some think that it could have been Ezra because of the writing styles and because of the two being together in the canon, that he could have been taking Nehemiah's journal and writing from it. So he's actually using the words of Nehemiah, but he's putting the final copy down on paper. Whether it's one or the other, hey, when you get to heaven, you can ask them, find out. Of the papyrus that they found. But it authenticates the story that is told in Nehemiah. And it's outside the realm of the Bible. Okay. We know that they had 3 that plotted against him. They did everything they could. We know that he went in and did this, of course, by the power of God, but he was an organized man. And the way he did it was he had the people at different points on the wall so that they were all working on their individual section. And their section was where they lived, because so many times the houses were connected either in the wall or to the wall. So what they did is he had them work on their portion of the wall where they lived or where they occupied the town. And it was done in, I think I saw 52 days. from start to finish, which is amazing for what they got accomplished. But when God's in it, that's but he was plotted against, and they even tried to get him to come outside the walls, no doubt to kill him. He was smart enough to know that he was going to meet opposition, and when he first went out and he got there and he went out to, because he didn't say exactly why he was there, and he went out in the middle of the night and explored and looked at what had to be done and what everything that was going on and what was going to have to happen. He did that at night. He snuck out there and did it. And he didn't make what he was doing known until he had his plan ready. So he definitely was a man of God who loved God and loved Israel. And he had a heart for seeing everything done that God wanted done. Which goes right back to the names where we started. His name means comforted by Yahweh, and his dad's name means who waits for the Lord. Okay, that pretty well gives us a outline of the book. We could go a little deeper, but there's no use in that because we're going to cover it chapter by chapter and verse by verse. So next week we will start on chapter 1 and we'll go as far in it as we can. Questions, comments, and thoughts? No. Mm-hmm. You're talking about Nisan, the month of Nisan. Oh, okay. 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 Yeah, but Hanukkah was added. It's modern compared to the other. But right. Oh yeah. Right. And there are a lot of other names in here, and we will research some of those names because they have their meaning helps to understand and add some things to the narrative. But I just started with father and son to start with tonight on the name. He had to be trusted. Yes. Yeah. And he was willing to go and leave all that to go out and be plotted against, hated. And he had been appointed as the governor of Jerusalem. So all those things work together. And as you put them together and learn them, you see how they jointly fit. And only God could work those things out so that they mesh and match the way they do. It, to exact 70 years. Yeah. Because that's what God said. I'm going to let the land rest for 70 consecutive years because you skipped 70. He keeps up with it. 70 Shemitah cycles. And a Shemitah cycle is 7 years. So 70 times 7. Wait a minute. Go to the New Testament. How many times should I forgive? How about that? Boom. See how that works? It's amazing how the numbers and how God works it. And I'll throw you one more tidbit in here. Jesus was the Word which became flesh, correct? What did they say about Jesus' coat? They were splitting up his bond, but when they got to his coat, because it was woven from top to bottom without seam, they wasn't going to rent it, so they cast lots for it. Well, when you look at the written Word, he was the Word who became flesh, and he wore a coat that was without seam. This Bible is woven from Genesis 1:1 to Revelation 22:21, and it's woven without seam. It's not two pieces put together anywhere. It works perfectly together. Amen. We thank you for being with us. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope you'll tune in for the rest of our Bible study on Nehemiah. We will start chapter 1, verse 1 next week. Thank you, and have a blessed night. Huh? That's right.